So I want to discuss with you something I normally never do about icons and pictures and the history and the connection between mythology and theology. There's a lot we can learn from the great saint George, the killer of the dragon or the dragon slayer. There's a lot we can learn about him, about the issue regarding masculinity or toxic masculinity as it's been coming to known today. He is the patron saint of England, and in 303 AD, the legend has it that he killed a dragon and became a martyr for the Christian church because he was killed because he refused to bow his knee to the royal dictates of the emperor Diocletian at the time. Because he stood his ground, he saved the princess, he fought the dragons of his day. He went down in history as one of the greatest men who ever lived. And any man who stands up for his family is a great man, like St. George. So what is the story of St. George? Well, it's complex and pretty multifaceted. The story comes out to say that he stood up as a Roman soldier under Diocletian through heavy persecution of his fellow Christians. And he stood up before the Senate, denounced everything he owned, gave away his work to the poor and his properties, and declared himself a Christian to those around him. And as a result, Diocletian, the great emperor, tried to get him to change his mind by offering him many status and gold and as well as property. He refused to do so. As a result, was persecuted heavily, was poisoned, was spiked through his body, through his legs. He would not give in. Finally, he came to a point where he was to the point of death, and the angel of the Lord, according to legend, came to him and revived him and told him to stand his ground, that God is with him, and he did. The emperor still refused, asked him if he would actually be the saint or the one who actually came from God, if he would actually raise the dead himself. Legend says that he went to a graveyard and raised the dead himself. We don't know all these things. A lot of this stuff seems to me more legend than it is history. But at the same time, there's a lot of truth to legends because, as I mentioned earlier, the link between mythology and theology are both grounded in concrete reality. Mythology is grounded in the reality of the psyche, the psychology of the mind, the human, the being, because it feeds on and touches on and expands upon our desire for truth, virtue, goodness, as well as loyalty. And mythology is ripe with that. And theology also does that, but the difference is that theology is grounded in concrete reality, which is history and geography, as well as the nature of the very ground that we walk on is what theology is grounded under. Because it's not just man-made per se, but it's God-given. Where mythology is man-made, but God-inspired in some sense, although not like the scriptures, of course. So there's a lot we can learn from St. George in this process. And then the legend also says that he was close to Beirut, and he had slain a dragon there, some kind of great beast, by rescuing the king's daughter in the process. Interestingly enough, if you look closely at the picture and the great legends of the slaying of the dragon within a lot of mythological tales, it tells you that the dragon itself is a symbol of persecution, of chaos, of evil, of destruction. Whereas the knight is the man who walks into that darkness, into that chaos, and brings order to it. But in order for him to do so, he has to enter the dark cave. There's a cave there that the dragon lives in. And for him to do that, he has to stand up against the darkness and face his own fears. To face his own fears means he has to be persecuted. And when you fight a dragon, something powerful, something against you, something in your life, whether today it could be your boss who persecutes you heavily at work, it could be a spouse who refuses to reconcile with you. In a sense, trying to fight for your marriage may mean fighting a dragon, like a spiritual nature. It could also mean fighting against the forces of darkness around you, whether they're sexual exploitation of children, trafficking, drugs, poverty. Those are also difficult things as well. And when you fight against them, expect persecution, expect to be pushed to the core of your being. Most people will not fight. Most people cannot fight because the odds of winning are very low. But if you do win, you win great rewards. So when you slay a dragon, you not only get his gold and his silver and his gems, but you also get the princess, if you look closely at the picture in there as well. See, a lot of women throughout all of history need a man who's strong, who's powerful, who's willing to face the dragons in life, who's willing to stand up against persecution. And that man becomes admired by his colleagues, and as a result gets the most gold. And thus, as a result, gets the best princess. Because princesses don't just want a man who's cowering in the corner waiting for other people to fight his battles for him. No, they want a man who will protect them and provide for them as a God-given duties of a man and what a man should do. And when a man does that, he faces danger, he faces darkness, he faces the dragon. And many men who face the dragon do not come back out alive. That's why most men don't face it. That's why most men are passive. That's why most men do not succeed and do very well in their life, whether professionally, psychologically, physically, or financially, because they're unwilling to face the dragons of their lives. And some face them, but they fail, and it hurts. The pain is overwhelming sometimes, and I get that. But the reward is out of this world in that sense, because if you beat the dragon, you not only get the girl, you get the gold, you also get the honor, and you get the accolations. And in the sense of sin as well, if you have indwelling sin in your life, you have to fight that sin. The Apostle Paul tells us there's constantly a war within all of us, a war against the old man with the new man. And that war has to be fought on a daily basis. Islamic scholars call it jihad, the inner war within you. It's that fighting within literary circles, what's called the Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde, that you have to fight against. So this is the story of St. George that tells us you have to fight the dragons in your life. You have to beat them. If you don't, they will beat you. And get this, in a famous series, it's actually one of the most famous in the world, the Game of Thrones. There's a little beast in there are little beasts in that story called dragons. They're small, they start off small, but they're left alone for a long time. These little dragons grow, and when they grow, they become larger than life, and they can destroy whole cities and villages and people's groups. So the point is, if you have little dragons in your life, deal with them as soon as possible. Otherwise, they will grow to bigger and more dangerous beasts that can not only breathe a little breath of air here and there, but a whole fire will come out of their mouth and destroy everything around you. Of course, this is a lot of mythology mixed with literary analysis, and then some theological spinning thrown in there as well. Campbell, one of my favorite authors, said, "The cave you fear to enter contains the treasure you most seek." We need to enter that cave, but to do so, we have to fight the dragon inside it. And sometimes that dragon is inside us. Go do well. Blessings to you all.